The architecture diagram here shows you all of the Azure services that we're using to create your vectorized data and to ground all of your queries securely on the Azure platform and produce the results that you're about to see. This is the second video in our series to show you how we've been able to put together a generative AI solution using a bunch of Microsoft technologies to give you a private grounded location for your JD Edwards data and your JD Edwards process information and your JD Edwards help information. And when you combine all of those three sources, you have an amazing ability to serve up context sensitive help to all of your users based upon your JD Edwards data and process information. What we have here is the ability to ask our assistant anything about what we've loaded up into the grounding location or into the vectorized location, and we went through that vectorizing process in the last video. You have work only query here. You can do work and web queries, and again you can adjust the web query using the Bing API to look at current websites and index that information in your familiar chat interface. And then finally, you have a generative option or capability as well. So therefore, you can just ask any questions of the model as it was built, the OpenAI model as it was built at that point in time, and get any information from that. So we can quickly ask generative AI, how can I enter a new customer into JD Edwards? And it's just going to use the entire information from the internet about this. It's not using any of our grounded data sources. And it's some general steps that might be beneficial. But if I come back to our data where I've trained it on the official JD Edwards documentation and then our customized process documentation, all of that has been put into my grounding locations, and it's been vectorized, and that is what all the queries will be built from to reduce the chance of hallucination. So how can I enter a new customer into JD Edwards address book? And so let's see what it's able to do with all that very specific information. And again, it's quite specific about its responses, and then it's also giving me references. And so if I go to any of these references and I go to the document tab, I can see exactly the documentation. And again, this is the documentation that I have loaded into my AI system of how to enter an address book entry, and it's able to pick all those up and run with it and form that information as text. And so we can ask it to do anything with all of that grounding information as possible. So what I wanted to show you now is I'm going to go through a couple of scenarios based upon me training or grounding all of my queries with about 256 unique pieces of JD Edwards documentation, and we'll go through a few scenarios on how we can see this working. So again, I'm just going to I'm quite interested in finding out whether I've got any duplicate address book entries in my system. So I'm going to ask it a quick question on how can I find a list of potential duplicate entries. And then it helps me out there by I'm setting up the address book master business function, going to this program, setting required fields to exclude them, and then to prevent the occurrence of duplicate addresses in JD, use the following measures. So fantastic, it's quite prescriptive on exactly how it allows me to prevent it from occurring in the future. And again, I can go to any of these references, they're all linked back, and I can see we're in the JD Edwards address book.pdf, and it puts me right in printing the check for duplicates report. So it puts me in the exact location to find the information I need, and it does it really quickly. Remember that I have the adjustments here, so I'm asking it to give me up to 8 references for every query that I ask for. I'm actually asking it to suggest follow-up questions, and you can see here one of the follow-up question suggestions is how can I update existing address book entries, and then I've got it being thorough in its responses, and I want a balanced conversation type. So again, I want to just give it a basic prompt here, but can it look at my data and see if there are potential duplicates in my data? And so looking at my data, there are potential duplicates, but again, it's come back and it's being a little bit generic. So I've got to work on my prompting. My prompt's not as exact as what it could be there. So it's a bit of a repetition on how to prevent duplicates going forward. So let's really have a go at our prompting here and be quite exact about what we want the LLM to do. So we're saying, given the data set that you have access to, provide me specific address book numbers that could be considered as duplicates. And here we go. So it's actually now it's looking for data. So I have uploaded a series of CSVs and PDFs, and we can see here that it thinks that address book 309.833 and 309.817, etc., are potential duplicates. And we can see once again that it has determined this because I've actually run the UBE that it suggested previously, and I've loaded up that duplicate address book entry UBE results into my repository, and then it is querying that repository to find these potential duplicates. So it's got access to the processes, and it's got access to the documentation, and it's got access to my data to give me some pretty customized results. Now, given that it's found a couple of potential duplicates, I might ask it, well, how am I able to, what are the ramifications of changing the address book number? That might be something that I want to do going forward to get rid of these duplicates. This is what it's suggesting. And then so it says, yeah, it's possible. However, there are a bunch of severe ramifications that I should consider in changing address book numbers. And that's excellent as well. So that really gives me ideas of what I should or should not be doing. And again, some really great references to the specific information. And if I needed to send that to my colleagues or whatever, I could send that through and it'd be really easy to do. Right, so that's fantastic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear the context here. Remember, clearing the chat allows me to clear the context as well. So, and that means that it won't have knowledge of previous conversations when I start a new conversation. I think it's important to note that if we look at work and web, for example, and we do an adjustment, if we want to query the web, we can ask it, what are some flavors of Breyers? And I believe that could be some ice cream. And it says, here we go, there's a bunch of different flavors. So when we're using the web way of querying, it is able to find information here. But if I use the work tab and I come across here and I want to, again, if I go home, and then I say, what are some flavors of Breyers using my work information only? You can see it's not hallucinating. It has no idea what flavors of ice cream because I've never uploaded any information like that to my repository to be vectorized and served up through my LLM. So a really important lesson there is that it is only using my work data sources to be able to do these queries. The other neat thing is we can compare that information with the web. So we can compare my work information or the responses to the queries with what it can find in the web and find out any differences, any material differences between those two queries. Again, back to my demonstration here. I'm going to close out the options. I'd like to know, I'm going to just change, I'm going to go through standard 8 responses. I'm pretty happy with that. I'm going to say, tell me about a customer called Cloud9 Incorporated. I don't know anything about this. Now, it's important to note that I do not necessarily have a JD Edwards license here. I'm just cutting and pasting into a large language model that's relying on some PDFs and CSVs that have been extracted from JD Edwards. So you have to determine the security ramifications of this. Of course, you could maybe limit people's access by not allowing them to have access to certain folders. And again, there's some amazing technology like Purview, and there's some amazing data tagging technologies that we can use so that LLM can't use any highly sensitive data when it responds to queries. But all of my data here in this example is quite generic. And again, it's given me some great information. It's given me the address of this customer. It's given me its customer number, branch, plant. And then they have multiple purchases, including men's jeans and skirts. So fantastic. And again, all the references to the JD Edwards documentation that has provided that information about Cloud9. So I'd actually like to know a little bit more about their order history. So let's see if we can get, again, I noticed how I say their order history because it's already got this in context, and what's the latest date they made an order. And so we can see here the latest date that they made an order is 24th of the 2nd, 23, multiple orders on this date, including for a purchase of skirts. Oh, so that's pretty interesting. I wonder if I can get their address details. I'm going to say just the address details here. And again, remember that we have to be fairly prescriptive with our LLMs. So it is able to find their address, and their address is Ralston Road, Nevada. So that's really handy. And again, there's 6 different references, and I think that's 6 different invoices that will show their address, that being their address. So I'd like a little bit more details about their orders. So can you provide me more details of their historical orders? So let's see what they have been ordering. Okay, so we can see here, they've ordered a bunch of different stuff, counterweights, interesting. I wonder if there's any information, I don't know that they have, but I wonder what the most profitable item that we have sold this particular customer. So what's the most profitable item we have sold them? Okay, so is the men's suit jacket with a profit margin. Doesn't look like a huge profit margin, but it's able to determine what the most profitable item was. And so you can see that they've ordered these jeans before. What is the average price they have paid for a pair of jeans? $75. Okay, so we might have a special on these jeans. I'm thinking we might sell them for 65. So can we do this? Can we send them an email? And then please use as much specific data about the customer as you can. Right, so let's see. So we're going to say that these jeans are $65, not $75. And so we're going to say, here we go. Fantastic. This is a great promotional email that we're going to send them. A lot of the heavy lifting's being done, and we could send that on to them. But guess what? I got no idea how to do that in JD Edwards. So now what I need to ask all my process documentation is, how can I add advanced pricing rules just in case they do get ordered that the new price is $65, not $75? And again, it gives me these really great instructions on, we can go to reference 1, we can see reference 1 here, we can go to the document, and we can see sales order management and implementation guide, and we can see that it's referring directly to customer advanced pricing groups and what we need to change for this particular area of JD Edwards. So it's able, again, through chat to find the exact results of the documentation changes that I need. But also imagine writing training materials. You're able to write your own training materials. You can choose, the style of document by persona settings, which you've got here, and write some really nice documentation that, again, you could hand to your users or give them the ability to create those documentation themselves. I'm going to clear that out now. I'll do one more example. And what I want to do is, this particular example is a little, hopefully, cool for developers. And so you can see here I've got my orchestration studio. In JDE, of course, I've got all my orchestrations. That's nice. I'll just sign in again. Timed out. That's all right. And what you can do in JDE, Edwards, as you'd be aware of, if I go to Tools, Definitions, unfortunately, it's jumped off the screen here. Oh, here. So I can download the Swagger or Open API definitions of all the orchestrations I have available to me. And in this particular situation, I am going to use this orchestration. So I've downloaded the Swagger and Open API definitions of all my orchestrations. And you can see here that this particular orchestration is for transfer inventory, and quite often you want to use that again and again if you're commissioning a new warehouse or moving bulk stock. This is something that you might want to do. And so let's go through a few scenarios. We can see the parameters, so the orchestration inputs for this particular function. And so what we want to do is maybe see how we could call this maybe with curl at the command line. So I wonder, what does my information assistant know? So let's see. So can you tell me? And if we look back here, it's the orchestration inputs. So I wonder if we can see. And so we can see that the body properties for this particular function are articulated as follows. And so what if I wanted to call that function with curl? Again, we talked about this. We want to call that inventory transfers, and let's use a base domain to call that function. And so there, it can write us a curl command quite simply and easily to enable us to do that. So that's fantastic. That saved a lot of time and effort, and we could put that into a script and run it again and again. But just say we were using some sort of Java-based platform for our orchestrations, then once again, I have the ability to ask the same question of my LLM. Remember, this is retrieval augmented generation. It knows the specifics about the parameters from my Swagger or Open API definitions. But the LLM side of things is able to add the generic Java code. So we can see here that it quickly builds us some Java code to be able to call the same orchestration. And but then I'm thinking, oh wow, the best way to do this is I have a list of all my items and inventory locations in an Excel spreadsheet. So why don't I get it to write me a macro that I can call multiple times? And again, so it's able to code a Visual Basic macro, which I can then load up a spreadsheet, and we can tell what the name of all, so A, B1, C1, D1. So we can see all the columns can be specifically transformed or specifically given these ranges in all of these cells, and then it'll go ahead and call our orchestration as many times as we want on the spreadsheet. So that's a really powerful way of using all the orchestration definitions and to enable our end users or our power users to get some that enterprise automation in the organization to be able to do simple things using the power of LLMs and the power of all of their processes and data that they have access to in JDE Edwards. So I hope you think that's as impressive as I do. If you need some assistance in making this a reality for your organizations, please reach out to Fusion 5. We're able to stand this environment up in hours, not days. We're able to get your project up and running, have your own personal, private, large language model processing over the top of your personal and private process documentation in no time at all. And we'd love to help you out with that.